Throughout human history, plagues and epidemics have devastated civilizations, bringing with them untold suffering and fear. Ancient societies had to endure these outbreaks with very little understanding of what caused them, often attributing them to angry gods, curses, or supernatural forces. Today, we will dive into some of the most terrifying ancient epidemics that shook entire empires and changed the course of history. One of the earliest recorded plagues was the Plague of Athens, which struck during the Peloponnesian War around 430 BCE. The disease, believed to have originated in Ethiopia, spread through Egypt and Persia before devastating Athens. It killed an estimated 100,000 people, roughly 1/4 of the city's population. The symptoms were gruesome: high fever, intense thirst, vomiting, and painful ulcers covering the body. Thucydides, an Athenian historian who survived the plague, wrote a detailed account of the social chaos it caused. People abandoned their morals, laws, and religion, believing death was inevitable. Funerals became mass burials, and the survivors were left to grapple with the collapse of their city's structure. To this day, scholars are uncertain about the exact cause of the plague, with hypotheses ranging from typhoid fever to Ebola-like viruses. Moving forward to the 2nd century CE, we encounter the Antonine Plague, which ravaged the Roman Empire from 165 to 180 CE. Likely brought back by soldiers returning from campaigns in the Near East, the disease swept through the Roman provinces, killing as many as 5 million people. The symptoms included fever, diarrhea, and skin eruptions, leading some researchers to believe it was either smallpox or measles. The great Roman physician Galen documented the outbreak, noting the devastating effect it had on both the military and the general population. The Antonine Plague is considered one of the factors that led to the eventual weakening of the Roman Empire, as it decimated the army and left the economy in shambles. Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself fell victim to the disease, which further destabilized the empire's leadership. Another epidemic that left a lasting impact on Rome was the Plague of Cyprian, which erupted in 249 CE and persisted for over a decade. Named after Saint Cyprian, a bishop who provided detailed accounts of the symptoms, this plague ravaged not only the city of Rome, but also spread to the outer provinces of the empire. Cyprian's descriptions included vomiting, bloodshot eyes, loss of hearing, and the horrific sight of people collapsing in the streets. At its peak, the plague was said to have killed 5,000 people per day in Rome alone. Some researchers speculate that it could have been a viral hemorrhagic fever, similar to Ebola, though there's no conclusive evidence. The effects of this plague were far-reaching, further crippling the Roman Empire and contributing to its gradual decline. A plague that shaped the history of the Byzantine Empire was the Plague of Justinian, which struck in 541 CE. This was one of the earliest recorded pandemics and spread rapidly through the Mediterranean region, particularly affecting Constantinople. It is estimated that at its height, the plague killed 10,000 people a day in the Byzantine capital alone, ultimately claiming up to 100 million lives over several decades. The disease was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the same pathogen that would later cause the infamous Black Death in the 14th century. The Justinian plague severely weakened the Byzantine Empire, hindering Emperor Justinian's efforts to reconquer parts of the Western Roman Empire. The collapse of trade routes and labor shortages caused a significant decline in the empire's economic and military power. The aftermath of the plague left the empire vulnerable to invasions and internal strife, marking a turning point in European history. One of the most mysterious and devastating ancient epidemics occurred in Mesoamerica, with the outbreak of Cocolistli in the 16th century. The disease hit the indigenous population of Mexico after the arrival of Spanish colonizers. Between 1545 and 1576, Cocolistli wiped out as much as 80% of the native population, causing untold suffering and leaving entire cities empty. The symptoms included high fever, black tongues, intense bleeding from the nose, and rapid death within days of infection. Modern researchers believe the disease could have been a form of viral hemorrhagic fever, though some suggest it was a particularly virulent strain of Salmonella which caused paratyphoid fever. Regardless of the exact cause, Coccolistli stands as one of the most lethal epidemics in history, decimating Mesoamerican societies and helping to facilitate the colonization by European powers. Fast forward to the 14th century, and we encounter one of the most infamous pandemics in human history, the Black Death, or the bubonic plague. This plague spread across Europe, Asia, and Africa, killing an estimated 75 to 200 million people between 1347 and 1351. The disease was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, transmitted through fleas that infested rats. Once infected, people developed painful swellings, or buboes, high fever, and black spots on their skin. The speed at which the plague spread was terrifying, often killing its victims within days. Cities were left desolate, economies collapsed, and entire villages were wiped out. The social impact of the Black Death was immense, leading to widespread panic, religious fervor, and in some cases, violent scapegoating of minority groups like the Jewish population. Some scholars argue that the Black Death fundamentally altered European society, leading to the end of the feudal system and sparking the beginning of the Renaissance. One of the lesser-known but equally destructive epidemics was the Moscow Plague of 1771. As the bubonic plague swept through the city, nearly a third of the population perished. The city's residents, desperate for solutions, turned to extreme measures, including riots and religious processions. These gatherings only worsened the spread of the disease, and eventually the Russian government had to impose martial law to restore order. The plague's devastating effects went beyond the immediate loss of life, as it caused food shortages and economic disruption, leaving a lasting scar on the region. The Hun-Spanish flu of 1918 is a more modern example of how pandemics can reshape the world. Though not ancient, its scale and speed of devastation are reminiscent of earlier plagues. This H1N1 influenza virus spread like wildfire, infecting roughly a third of the world's population and killing between 20 and 50 million people. Unlike most strains of the flu, the Spanish flu primarily targeted young, healthy adults, leading to a collapse of social structures as soldiers returning from World War I carried the virus to all corners of the globe. The pandemic's long-term effects included significant changes in public health policies and scientific research into vaccines. Returning to antiquity, there is also the Plague of Athens to consider once more. The political and social ramifications of this plague were immense. Not only did it significantly weaken Athens during its war with Sparta, but it also left psychological scars on the survivors. The disease caused a breakdown in Athenian society as people abandoned both law and morality, leading to chaos within the city walls. The epidemic contributed to Athens' eventual defeat in the Peloponnesian War and the decline of its golden age. Lastly, it's important to note that epidemics weren't just destructive forces in the ancient world. They also reshaped religious and philosophical thinking. For instance, many survivors of the Black Death began to question the authority of the Church, which had been unable to stop the plague despite widespread prayers and rituals. This led to a period of religious reform, with movements like the Protestant Reformation taking root in the years that followed. Similarly, the ancient plagues of Rome and Byzantium contributed to the spread of Christianity, as people sought solace and explanations for their suffering in new belief systems. As we look back at these ancient epidemics, it becomes clear that while we have made incredible advances in medicine and public health, we are not immune to the threat of pandemics. The ancient world's struggles against disease remind us of the fragility of human societies in the face of nature's wrath. Today, we have a much better understanding of how diseases spread and how to combat them, but the lessons of the past are still relevant. Epidemics can emerge at any time, and their impact can be as much social and political as it is biological. In conclusion, ancient plagues and epidemics were more than just diseases. They were events that shaped the trajectory of human history. From the downfall of empires to the birth of new ideologies, the impact of these outbreaks was profound. As we continue to study these ancient pandemics, We gain valuable insights into how to protect ourselves from future outbreaks and how the human spirit can endure even in the face of unimaginable devastation.